Shalom and welcome, family. I want to welcome everyone to today's discussion on behalf of the Universal Temple of Israel, the Universal Temple of Yahweh. My name is Adiel, and I will be your host today. Let's go ahead and start first by giving honor, glory, and thanks to our Heavenly Father, YAHWEH, Yahweh, by the Lord's Prayer in Hebrew. Tefillah. Abenu Shabbat Shemayim, Yikadesh Shemirka, Tabu Makuteka, Yas Arizonka, Kiba Shemayim, Kema Aretz, Elekem Kukenu, Tain Lanu Hayom, Uslak Lanu, All Katienu, Kion Shasol King, Gamanaknu, Lyko Tam Lanu, Real Tefienu, Ladeni Sayon, King Alsenu, Min Hara, Kilaka, Hamamlaha, Bea Gibara, Bea Tifierth, Leolame, Olamin, Sila. I want to welcome you all again. And today's discussion will be about the parallel that exists between the whole word and the whole food as produced by the Creator Yahweh. So, the first thing I want to go ahead and do is we're going to start with a couple verses. The first of which is Romans 1 and 20, and we're going to go to Ecclesiastes 1 and 9. Romans 1 and 20 reads, "For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse." Now, the context of this, of course, is about unbelievers not being able to perceive the things that are not tangible and physical, right? And this kind of shows you that he's created evidence of these things via the things that are physical, that are tangible, that have been made for you to touch, to see, to hear, to smell, to taste. Ecclesiastes 1 and 9, it reads, "The thing that hath been, it is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun." So what this demonstrates to us is that every situation that occurs, everything that exists, has some parallel that has already been created. There's no actual new novel situation you run into, right? Everything has some sort of parallel in which you can compare and understand that thing, right? This we see in the garden when Adam named all creatures. To name a creature is to characterize a creature. And we wonder sometimes why creatures have the behavior they have. Certain animals, you look at their behaviors and you're like, well, that's not good, at least for us, it's not good for us. Why did the Creator do this? Why did he create these creatures with these behaviors? The behaviors are a parallel to the behaviors that could be demonstrated by people. So he's helping you to understand these behaviors and the outcomes of these behaviors without you having to actually do them yourself, right? And so he's shown you things that are not visible, things that are not seen, evidenced by things that are seen, right? So let's kind of understand a broader idea, right? The whole word, the word as we have it, that he gave it to us, versus the word where people pick and choose certain things from here, from there, for their particular purpose, and not the purpose that was established from the beginning by the Creator Yahweh. And we want to look at the outcomes between those two things. His intended outcome, of course, by the whole word, and the outcome that occurred by us taking bits and pieces for our purpose, right? And let me preface this really quickly that it's not just about taking pieces for a particular purpose, because we do that and um, this works, but it's when you take particular things and you try to use it for the same purpose as that whole thing was designed for, right? So if he designs for the wheat to be food for us, right? That's the whole wheat. That's the germ, which is the protein and some of the fats, the fiber, and the actual carbohydrate. All of that together is designed to be a food. But we sometimes will take a certain piece of it, right? Like just the carbohydrate portion that we call flour, right? And we'll try to make food out of that, right? You have whole wheat bread that's made from the entire wheat versus your plain bread that is not made from the entirety of the wheat. And we know the differences in the outcome of those two kinds of bread, right? That's kind of what I mean. We may take the fiber from the bread and use that as a bulking agent for other things. And there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing bad comes of that, because the purpose of the fiber is to create bulk, but to help also move things out of your system. And when we take that fiber and we use it for that same purpose, it does what it's supposed to do and it works out. But when we take bits and pieces and try to use that for the entire purpose to approximate the entire purpose of his whole word, it becomes problematic. Okay, now that we have that out of the way, let's go ahead and start. The reason why we're going to use food is because food feeds and nourishes the body, just as the word feeds and nourishes our mind and spirit, right? We become part, made up of the food that we eat, right? So when we eat bad food, toxic foods, our body is not in good health. When we eat whole foods and healthy foods, it restores the proper order and health of our body. And the word is like this too. When we eat bad philosophies, then our own personal selves and our communities become sick. When we take in good philosophies, then we prosper. So let's start with the food a little bit. And we're going to parallel these things, okay? So I'm going to choose this particular food because I actually had this food a couple weeks back and it's been a while since I've had it. But let's use the beet as an example, okay? So beets are those dark, dark, dark red. They look almost purple fruit. Um, it's not really a fruit. It's a root. It's the root of a particular plant, and we will either boil or juice this particular root in order to consume it. And beets, as I read here, actually improve your heart health. They actually lower your blood pressure as well. And they actually cause your circulation, right? That's the blood flowing through your body, to actually become more efficient, right? So athletes can improve their athletic performance by eating beets because beets contain nitrates. And these nitrates actually help to open up the blood vessels. And then it allows more air, more oxygen to reach the tissues so that we don't have a buildup of lactic acid, which tightens the muscles and causes them to cramp and lock up. You know, it does all these great things for you, okay? And nitrates, that's just a subset. We can go into that too. Nitrates, as we see here, it makes the circulation more efficient. It makes the clearing of lactic acid more efficient by opening up the vessels. And this works in the context of the beet because the beet also has lots of antioxidants present. Now, another place we see nitrates, and this is kind of goes into the example of what I said, okay? Nitrates exist in the beet to help you with circulation, right? To open up the vessels, to help blood flow. That's what their purpose is in the beet. Now, human beings have taken nitrates and have used them in another purpose outside of their original intended purpose, right? They use these nitrates in order to create nitrites to preserve meats. Now, when you use it in that context, do you know what nitrates and nitrites do? They cause gut cancer. They cause it to happen specifically and most aggressively in women and little children. So it goes from something that opens up the vessels, that improves circulation, that improves your ability to utilize oxygen and get rid of acid buildup. It goes from that to something that causes cancer because it's being used in a completely different way in the human body than the creator intended. And it's also being used out of the context that the creator intended, which is in the presence of antioxidants. Antioxidants actually stop the nitrate nitrite conversion to nitrosamines, which are the carcinogenic precursor, right? It stops that from occurring. Now, I want to show you what happens when we make, right? This beet is a whole food for us. It's meant to nourish our bodies and improve aspects of our health. Now, when we take a certain component of it and try to use it for the same purpose as the whole component, I'm going to do the second thing that I talked about. Beets. We all know what we get from beets. When you boil beets and you eat those beets, what do you notice? It tastes sweet. So, the gods of this world decided, hey, let's get sugar from beets. So they actually take sugar out of beets and then have people consuming sugar, right, for calories. Now, we already know what the consumption of refined sugar does, but I'm going to read a few of them off. It actually causes worse heart health, right? Because it causes hyperlipidemia and hypercholesterolemia, which basically creates lots of fats in the blood, cholesterol, and it clogs the arteries. You have lots of little vessels that surround the heart, right? The heart feeds itself first with the nutrient and oxygen rich blood. It feeds itself first before it feeds anywhere else. And so all of these fats will clog these little vessels and it chokes the heart. It can potentially cause a myocardial infarction. Okay? Eating all of this sugar, refined sugar, also causes an increase in your blood pressure, right? And it causes this increase in your blood pressure due to vascular changes, right? You have glycosylation of the vessels, which causes them not to function the way that they're supposed to function. It also causes the breakdown in the dysfunction of the small vessels, and it also causes dysfunction in the kidneys. All of these things lead to increased blood pressure, right? And your circulation, which was improved by the whole beet, now becomes compromised by those same small vessel dysfunctions that we just talked about. So we see here how the whole food helps us and nourishes us, and then this partitioned food that the gods of this world create, you take it out of, the way that Yahweh wanted it to be. You take a bit and piece and you try to say, here you go, here, consume this. And we see what this does to our body, right? And we also see what a good thing, a good part, right? What we talked about, the whole wheat, like when you take the fiber and you use the fiber for the same purpose that the fiber works in the whole food, we use it for that same purpose elsewhere and nothing bad happens. Okay, it works well, right? And we saw with the beet what happens when you take a part of it for a particular that works a particular purpose in the beet, nitrates, and we take it and we use it for something different, preserving meat, curing meat, and we see the bad thing that happens, right? So let's go ahead and move on to the word. Let's show you. We saw that. Let me draw the parallel for you. We're going to go now to the word, and we're going to show you how what the whole word is, right? And we're going to show that to you after we tell you how mankind and their man-made religions have taken bits and pieces of the word. And some of you may not get that and you may not understand that, but let me do something with words here. Let me break down words. Let's go to the book of understanding, which is the dictionary. And we're going to pair that with the book of wisdom and knowledge, which is the Bible. The book of understanding tells you that the root of religion is a word which means to bind the hands up, like to shackle them up. We know that the word says that ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Those are two different things. Binding up one's hands, shackling them together, and making one free are two different things. So, by its very namesake, religion in and of itself takes bits and pieces of God's word and causes the opposite outcome to happen than what God intended with his whole word. We saw that when you take a whole beet versus you take bits and pieces, the sugar, and you feed it. We saw two completely opposite outcomes. And the same thing occurs with the word. Let's give you a couple of examples of a couple of different things, right? The first thing I want to discuss is what the Bible says about, quote unquote, casting stones, right? We know what that means, to cast judgment, okay? To call something out, to criticize something, okay? So let's see what religion will tell you concerning that, okay? We're first going to go to John chapter 8. John chapter 8 and verse 7, because you seem to hear this a lot these days, right? People will tell you this. John chapter 8 verse 7 reads, "So when they continued asking him, the Son of Man, he lifted up himself and said unto them, He that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her." And he's talking about a woman accused of harlotry. And they're condemning her. And he's saying, of you who is without sin, you first cast a stone. And we know how the story goes. That those who heard him looked and said, well, I'm not without sin. And they all went away and nobody casted a stone. Okay? That's what religion tells you. And religion tells you that, especially modern religion, as an excuse to excuse immoral behavior. When you simply go by this, you wind up excusing immoral behavior. No one can tell you anything. No one can criticize and rightly judge immoral behavior. Immoral behavior is able to do what it wants because the person trying to chastise is not perfect. We all know this is problematic through our personal lives, those of you who have children. Imagine if a child told you he without sin cast the first stone every time you tried to criticize him or chastise him for doing something he shouldn't be doing. Could you imagine that? If you actually followed that line of thinking, you could never tell your child anything, could you? He would just continue to misbehave, and he'd say every time you get ready to chastise him, he without sin cast the first stone. Now, we already know that this is not what this is trying to tell you, correct? Let's read what it actually tells you in its entirety, okay? John chapter 8, and we're going to continue to go down further to verse 10 and 11. And it reads, when Jesus or Yehoshua had lifted himself and saw none but the woman, because remember they all left, he said unto her, Woman, where are those thine accusers? Hath no man condemned thee? She said, No man, Lord. And Jesus said unto her, Neither do I condemn thee. He said, Go and sin no more. So he without sin cast the first stone has to do with condemnation. He's saying here that I will not condemn you either, but what he said is sin no more. So apparently, telling a person not to sin does not count as casting stones or judgment at a person. It is the right of the Creator Yahweh and His alone to cast judgment, but we can chastise. In fact, the word tells us that we chastise those whom we love, right? And that God chastises us because He loves us. So let's not confuse righteous chastisement with casting judgment, because they are not the same. That is a clever sleight of the enemy to guilt you into not properly chastising and loving your brother and neighbor, right? To not see them improve and to become better, to continue to live in sin. So we have to understand it is our job to do these things. This is what we understand when we read the whole word. The whole word teaches us this. And we begin to have communities and congregations and societies that are not plagued with sin, right? Whereas when we take bits and pieces out of the context in which the Creator intended, like I said, we now have the excuse for sin to run rampant and unchecked. And that is not what the Creator intended. We know that as well because the gospel, as commanded by Yehoshua, was that we spread the gospel of repentance, which is changing of one's wicked ways. There was a particular quote, and I don't remember the philosopher who made the quote, but this quote means it states that it is human to err, but to stay in error, right, is diabolical. So it is human to make mistakes, and we will make mistakes, but it is our greater nature that we turn from those mistakes, we learn from those mistakes, and we do better. When we live in that mistake, it is diabolical, which you can hear from that word diablo. That's hellish, that's hell-like. To live in a mistake, to live in and love a mistake, to love that error. And this is why we must chastise and correct the error of our brethren in a loving and righteous way. And we also have to chastise and correct our own error. We do. I'm going to give you another example, right? When it comes to loving your enemy, this is a tough topic, right? This is one that's hard for a lot of people to do, and they strive towards it, and some people They speak against it, and some people speak for it. And this is a real controversial topic between different religious groups and denominations. But let's tackle it. Okay. It is found in the book of John. I'm sorry, not the book of John. It's actually found in the book of Matthew. Let's go to Matthew chapter 5. And you know what? Let's go ahead and go to verse 44 because I want to go ahead and read to you what it says because people always say, love your enemy, love your enemy. Okay? Matthew 5:44 reads, but I say unto you, and this is all in red, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. So some people say, this doesn't really sit right in my soul. Like, I don't get it. And others will say, well, you don't have the soul of the creator of the soul of the Lord Jesus. So there's this whole controversy there. And some say it's so hard. We have to strive towards it. Well, I have to help you to understand that there is a context in which this applies. And I must tell you, it is a very narrow context in which this applies. This, unfortunately, has been intentionally misapplied, and it's been misapplied to the detriment of entire peoples. It has been misapplied maliciously and knowingly to the detriment of peoples. Let's break it down and help us to understand why and how. Okay? I'll read it again. Matthew 5:44. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. That's what religion would have you believe about that. Let us break this down a little bit more to the whole word, right? See, the whole word, one must look at this particular chapter in the context of this chapter. We must also understand something interesting about these particular metaphors, right, and these symbolisms that are used, right? They use metaphors earlier on about being sued for garments and giving them even more, right? These are just metaphors, right? Now, let's go into the whole word, right? The whole, when it comes to loving neighbors and loving enemies, the whole word tells you many things concerning this. And if you are unstable and unlearned, if you haven't done your 2 Timothy 2:15, then you don't understand what the whole word has to say about loving your neighbor versus loving your enemy. Okay? So let us first do this. Let us first go to 2 Samuel. 2 Samuel 19:5-7. And it reads, before it reads, I'm going to go ahead and give you a little bit of context, okay? This is about Joab, right? And Joab, it's saying that in this particular case right here that Absalom, you know who Absalom was. Absalom was the son of David, right? Absalom came after David, came after his throne, his wives. He came after David. And this particular this particular chapter here is speaking to the king, which in this case it would appear that the king here that's being spoken to is David. In verse 5 here, We're going to do 5 through 7. It reads, and Joab came into the house to the king. And it's kind of funny because David was actually chastised by Nathan. Um, David is here being chastised by Joab. So in verse 5 it reads, and Joab came into the house to the king and said, thou hast shamed this day the faces of all thy servants, which this day have saved thy life, and the lives of thy sons and of thy daughters, and the lives of thy wives, and the lives of thy concubines. Verse 6, and that thou lovest thine enemies and hatest thy friends. For thou hast declared this day that thou regardest neither princes nor servants. For this day I perceive that if Absalom had lived and all we had died this day, then it had pleased thee well. Verse 7, now therefore arise, go forth and speak comfortably unto thy servants. For I swear by the Lord Yahweh, if thou go not forth, there will not tarry one with thee this night, and that will be worse unto thee than all the evil that befell thee from thy youth until now. He's talking about when Saul went after him, with the Philistines. He's talking about Absalom. He's saying that it's going to be worse now than all of that together. So he's telling him how bad it is, how evil of a thing it is for you to love people who are trying to hurt, murder, and kill you, to come after you, and to just disregard and have no love or no concern for your own people, your own household, those who stood beside you and were faithful to you. Now, how does this go along with what we just read in Matthew chapter 5:44? Let's go through the rest of the Bible, and it's going to tell you exactly why this is bad. First Timothy 5 and 8. 1 Timothy 5 and 8 reads, but if any provide, the word provide here means to provide for one. It means to take thought for one. And it's going to come up again to, thinking about one, or to care for someone, right? It means to take thought for, provide, or to care for, okay? But if any provide not for his own, and especially for those of his own house, he hath denied the faith, and is worse than a non-believer, an infidel. So it's telling you that you have to provide for your own, right? Some people, they'll teach and preach Matthew 5:44, but they won't teach and preach you the part where you have to love and provide for your own first and foremost. You're starting to get the context of Matthew 5:44, but I'm going to help you explain the context a little bit better. Proverbs 13:22. Proverbs 13 and 22. And it reads, a good man leaveth an inheritance to his children's children. And the wealth of the sinner is laid up for the just. This is important. It says a good man leaveth an inheritance to his children's children. I'm going to go into this a little bit later too. Mark 3 and 27. Mark 3 and 27. And it reads, No man can enter into a strong man's house and spoil his goods, except he will first bind the strong man and then he will spoil his house. So the word here, strong man, means one who is strong or mighty, one who has strength of soul to sustain the attacks of Satan. So that means that if you allow those to come into your house and spoil your house, that means you are weak. You are weak in soul. You have not sustained the attacks of Satan. You have succumbed to Satan's onslaught. That's what this means. And we saw before that you are worse than a non-believer when you don't provide or care for your own home. That's what it says, your own people. Joab just told David, you must love and care for and regard and think of your own servants, your own princes, your own wives. You have to think of them and stop thinking of those who sought to murder you. To think of them endlessly, to mourn them and not regard those who are around living, those who you have to take care of. This is horrible. This is bad. So we start to understand the context of Matthew 5:44. Let's go back to Matthew 5:44 and let's break down some of those words. Let's define some of those words. The word love, when it says love your enemies, this particular word means to welcome, to entertain, or to be fond of, or it means to love someone. So what did he mean here? Well, if you understand some of these later verses in this particular chapter, it might very well be better interpreted, that word love, to means to welcome and entertain, right? Because we see here, he says something here: love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. He's setting up, right? He's setting up a foil, right? The opposites. He's setting up opposites here. He's juxtaposing one thing to the other. This is a device. This is a device and argument, right? This is a rhetoric. It's a type of rhetoric, right? He's trying to set up with what he's saying. The word here, enemies, means people who are hostile towards you. I'm going to show you what I mean by he's trying to set this up. It means people who are hostile. He says, love your enemies. Enemies are people who are hostile to you. The word love means to welcome and entertain. He's trying to say, be welcoming and be hospitable to those who are hostile. That's what's actually being said here. Translations can make night and day of a verse. Okay? He says, bless them that curse thee. You see? He says, do good, which means beautifully, excellently, honorably, nobly, to speak well of, right? That's what do good means, to them that hate you. And this word hate here means to detest. So that's the opposite of detest. He's trying to do this, and he's done this before when he's spoken to crowds and spoken to his disciples. And some people don't get it. They read it with these translations and they get the wrong idea. Okay? Now, what this doesn't mean is to have Stockholm syndrome for peoples or groups of peoples who try to murder and destroy you and your people. That does not mean that, right? If we try to use that in this context, we already have the example of the so called black man of America in America. He has, for the longest time, loved and turned the other cheek to a group of people who hated him. What good has that done? Tell me what good has that done by itself? What good has that done? Because, see, he wasn't taught to love himself. Matter of fact, when he chooses to love himself and to take care of himself, right, and to celebrate his neighbors and the accomplishments of his ancestors, is looked at as extremism, right? Supremacy. There's a bad light casted on that. But he has, for the longest time, loved those who have murdered, used, and robbed him. And what has that done? That has caused a disintegration of his communities. It's caused the people who have not thought about their own wives and thought about their own husbands and thought about their own children and set up an inheritance for their children, right? Every generation with the so-called black men of America has to start over, right? And that's not good. You're not a good man when you do that. Why? Because you're supposed to leave an inheritance for your children's children. Do you see how misapplying Matthew 5:44 puts you in direct violation of other things in the Bible that states that you have to do in order to be good, in order to be above the infidel, in order to be morally and spiritually strong and enduring? Do you see how the improper context of Matthew 5:44 puts you in conflict with those things? Right? We have a nation like Burkina Faso that was blessed with uranium salts under their soil, right? The Creator Yahweh blessed these people to have this uranium in their soil so that one day, right? These days, now that we have nuclear power, that this matters for today. It didn't matter 1,000 years ago. Nobody had nuclear power 1,000 years ago. So Yahweh was creating an inheritance for his children's children, the children's children of that area. And it allows them to create power without polluting their air. It allows them to create lots and lots of power for decades, right? But what was happening is that a group of people called the French were going in and they were installing puppet leaders that weren't regarding and caring for the people. They were simply allowing the French to steal the uranium, essentially steal the uranium, spoiling the nation, right? For pennies on the dollar. Not even pennies on the dollar. That's being generous. And the nation suffered. But a leader has taken over in the country and has kicked the French out. And now the people are starting to prosper with the blessing that the Creator Yahweh gave to them from the foundation of this earth gave to them. And now they're able to build infrastructure, build power, get clean water, build luscious gardens to feed and nourish their people. And guess what? They can do that while selling uranium at a fair price to other nations. So other nations are able to be blessed. But first and foremost, the people in Burkina Faso are able to be blessed. See, this is actually how you do Matthew 5:44 correctly, right? By kicking out the thief who comes to spoil your home and not letting him spoil your home, you're able to prosper and bless your people, right? But guess what? Instead of saying, you know what? I don't like the fact that you all despitefully used us, right? It wasn't in Matthew 5:44. So we're not going to give you any uranium. We're not going to give any of you anything. Well, then, they'd prosper a little bit by being able to use that uranium for themselves. but they're not able to prosper a lot by being able to also sell it to other nations who need it. So, by able to still sell it to the French at a fair price, the French are still able to prosper some, but Burkina Faso, first and foremost, is able to prosper. Do you see how this works? Everybody prospers. When you follow the whole word, all those things we talked about in First Timothy, Proverbs, Mark, and we use Matthew 5:44 in the narrow context that is actually intended, everybody prospers. So, with that, family, I hope you have learned something from this class in how taking the whole word of Yahweh into your heart and mind and acting on this whole word nourishes and enriches you, your household, and the entire world. I thank you all for listening. I bless you all. I thank the Creator Yahweh endlessly for giving me the ability to see what He's written. And I wish the same, and I pray the same for every one of you. Shalom Aleichem and Aniyahab.